Planning Board, the Land Use Committee, and the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. If you could all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be great. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first of all, I want to thank everyone very much from all the boards that are attending tonight. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to do this together and get one presentation. I think it's great for us to be working together this way. In order to be as efficient as possible, I want to let everybody know how this is going to work. First, we are going to have a presentation to give us some background on the state of life sciences, not just in Burlington, but all around. And we will be receiving that from Matt Daniels, who's the Executive Managing Director at Jones Lang LaSalle. I'd ask you all to hold your questions until the end of his presentation, and then there will be time for you to ask questions at that time. After that, we are going to have a brief address from our own Chairman of the Board of Health, Ed Weiner, who's going to address some concerns and thoughts that he wants to share with us. And then Kristen will give us a summary about what's before us. We're on a tight schedule because we have to start our regular planning board meeting at 7, and then after that, we are also going to be hearing from an application from Murray Hills. So the last probably 15 or 20 minutes before 7 that's what we'll be doing then. And then at 7 o'clock, we have a hard stop because we have to start the planning board meeting. So, Mr. Daniels, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.
I would like to just start by introducing myself. I am a 23-year veteran of the commercial real estate industry, starting originally with Spalding and Sly, and my market of choice back in the day was Burlington, so I've been working exclusively in and around the Burlington market for the last 23 years, and now run all of brokerage for JLL, which we've seen a lot of tremendous changes. And one of those changes is the different uses that we have in different projects. So this presentation is a little bit about the opportunity, what we've seen in other surrounding towns, and maybe one of the misnomers. Historically speaking, everyone said life science, it must be Cambridge. And that was very common for people to believe because the draws of MIT and Harvard and what was going on in Kendall Square, the voice of life science actually started in Cambridge and continues to perpetuate Cambridge. What people don't realize is the magnitude of what happens outside of the city of Cambridge.
Matt, can I pause you just for a second? And feel free if you want to sit instead of stand, feel free. I just wanted to highlight for those of you that have a packet, there's a packet that also has the presentation that you see on the screen as well. So I just wanted to highlight that, and also we'll kind of have phases, and if there's any questions about the presentation, we'll have an opportunity when Matt concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Great.
You guys intentionally withholding the packet from us over here, or no?
Is this, what's this?
Sure.
Oh, here's one. That
many-
will be
the
for you.
Packet's inside. The packet's in, that's for Joe.
You have it, Joe.
I just gave Joe
I
this.
think that's this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had an
Thank you.
extra-
Sorry.
the rest of it was- Oh, you don't have one?
So I'll start the second slide here, that really talks about breaking down the supply and what people refer to as a cluster. And the belief of myself and that of, even Bob Coughlin of MassBio is that a capable cluster is one where you can draw employees. You could have the nicest life science building in the world in North Dakota, but if you don't have capable scientists and employees, you'll never create a cluster. And so, as it relates to a global view of life science, we see a big difference between Lexington or in Woburn or Billerica and Waltham, but the reality is that the rest of the world chasing life science talent doesn't. So we're very parochial and have been historically as we looked at market to market. But as you look at some of the stats up here, with East Cambridge having 10 million square feet out of a 31 million square foot commercially leased or owned marketplace, I will tell you that there's more life science supply outside of Cambridge than in. If East Cambridge fell into the Charles River, we would still be the largest life science cluster in the country. So life science supply is real. We've seen great campuses built by EMD Serono just north of us in Billerica, Santa Fe Genzyme out on the Mass Pike, and we continue to see that in the growth of the life science industry, 18% year over year job growth, and we'll get into some of those stats. But as you look at some of these markets, the Middlesex Turnpike, which is 2.5 million square feet, totaling 32 buildings, is the second largest microcluster. So I like to think of Boston as a cluster, and in a heat map, obviously from a rental standpoint and a demand standpoint, Cambridge has the highest point of demand. But the reality is that traffic problems, mitigation, some of the uses that happen in life science space are not conducive, along with rental rates and available of product. So the Middlesex Turnpike, a lot of lab services companies, and tremendous demand. And then you look at, Hartwell Ave, a little bit.
I hate to interrupt you. I was just curious as to why it was broken down to Middlesex Turnpike and not the towns that are comprised.
We're going to get to that, Joe, but it's fairly thin in Burlington, and it's more robust north. So it was just done not by town, the same way the South Shore wasn't done by town. We have the breakdown by towns,
Okay.
but these are how people commute, transact, eat, and work within a space. We have it broken down differently in Lexington, where there's the Hayden Ave Spring Street interchange, where there's 1 million square feet, and then the Hartwell Wiggins, both in Lexington, both work independently and are priced independently. So the takeaways from our study and looking at the 31 million square feet is that there's more product outside of Cambridge than inside, that the suburban supply is larger than the total Research Triangle, which is our other East Coast competitor down in North Carolina, that the majority of lab inventory in the suburban market is underserved by amenities. That's an important factor as we talk about what happens into the future and what tenants, demand going forward or are looking for. That there is, a lot of development in the pipeline in the Seaport and in East Cambridge and in Waltham, but that will all be new, very expensive space, based on land bases, specifically in Cambridge and in and around the Seaport. Again, just a little circle map as to seeing, how spread out it is. Of the 96,000, I believe, life science workers in Massachusetts, 65,000 of them live in Middlesex County. That's a bit.
Can you say that again?
Of the 96,000 life science employees, 65,000 of them live in Middlesex County.
Wow.
That's a big stat, and it's a big driver. And that's why we've seen such a tremendous influence north and west of the marketplace. I do also want to point out that traffic plays a big role in life science. When you are working in Cambridge and you move out of Cambridge and you stay in the same field that you've been in, it's really hard to get to Cambridge from the South Shore. So if you're talking about the Mass Pike and the access roads, it's why we tend to see a lot of people that live in Concord, Lincoln, Burlington, Billerica, Andover, even up into the North Shore. There's 1 million square feet, if you look at the slide, alone in Woburn, there's 1 million square feet up in Danvers of life science space. So, you see a more heavily bent marketplace to the north. Obviously, the Seaport's doing exceptionally well. There's continued growth and projected growth into those markets. But I think the North Shore will continue to get its fair share. I just highlighted a couple of the maps of some of the locations. This is the Hartwell Ave, Wiggins Ave directory. Obviously, Millipore Sigma is a large campus down there. King Street owns the Wave Life Sciences building where Quanterix was, Unicure, Agilent. One of the reasons that this market really took a grasp was Alexandria Real Estate Equities. ARE, which is a REIT, in the life science business came in and bought buildings that were former defense buildings, given proximity to Hanscom Air Force Base, and converted buildings individually, 40,000, 35,000, 60,000 square feet at a time, and they put life science into those buildings. Life science companies at that time were venture funded, much like they are now, but much lower basis. There was a lot more risk in the life science business, historically speaking. And ARE was that kind of operator that was willing to put very expensive infrastructure into buildings to convert them from R&D, flex, office buildings to life science buildings, wildly expensive, and we can talk about that if you'd like, and take the risk on putting in life science businesses. So where the landlord was willing to spend money is where those tenants went, and that's why Hartwell Ave and Wiggins had taken off. If we go to the next slide, the Hayden Ave, this was really led the way by Ledgemont, which is a big project right at the interchange. And then when Raytheon moved out, Atlantic Development had come in and worked with Shire Pharmaceuticals at the time, a tremendous grower in the life science space. They moved out of Cambridge, and they have roughly about 1 million square feet there now, Takeda, as it looks on Patriot Way. Alexion Pharmaceuticals, the W.R. Gray site where Kaleido and Merck are, was converted to life science space by Cubist Pharmaceuticals, who was bought by Merck. The Woburn Marketplace, a little bit different. A lot of single-story buildings that are suitable for life science. And I think that that's interesting to note, that a lot of buildings, you can't just take this building that we're sitting in today. It doesn't have the floor-to-floor heights. It needs special infrastructure to accommodate the amount of air that you need to move through a building. So clear height between buildings, the amount of power, being on sewer, are all very, very high on the mandate list for converting an existing building to life science. Bill Cummings, who owns much of this, has had the resources in those buildings that are easy to convert, and has done roughly about 900,000 square feet of life science space in Woburn, and, obviously has the resources and puts money into those buildings to convert them. So that's about a couple miles, east of us, and that's about 1 million square feet, 900,000 square feet. Then I get to Middlesex Turnpike, and this is a very interesting, so starting at Millipore Sigma, which I think we all know, the Gutierrez project at next at 400, 600 Summit, and looking up to the, right to left, north on Route 3, we go through what is Northwest Park and Network Drive, and we look at, all of the massing that happens in the Burlington market, roughly around 6.5 million square feet of Class A space. And then you see where sort of Bedford and Billerica come together, and it's some odd geography. I'm not sure who drew the map on that one, but Crosby Drive has its fair share of life science space, lab services companies, as does EMD Serono on Middlesex Turnpike, and then all the way up, actually up into Concord Road. So most of the Middlesex Turnpike cluster, as we refer to it, is really north of Network Drive on the campus. While some of the better projects obviously are in Burlington, being Network Drive and Millipore Sigma, the majority of the tenants have found solutions north on Middlesex Turnpike. So again, going back to the where is and why does Burlington or any market inside of 495, why does it relate? It's about the fact that the colleges and the science is changing the Boston real estate market. Is about scientists, those STEM-educated students that are graduating, and those, quite frankly, with PhD graduates and degrees. And if you look at nationally, San Francisco versus Boston, and what our growth has been, I think the highest thing to note is that the number of PhD graduates in Boston has increased by 32% since 2010, where San Francisco has seen its number decrease by 6%. So Governor Baker were in the room today, he'd say that we lost the technology war. We are not going to lose. We're not going to lose the war on life science, and we've been growing at a very steady pace where other markets have really envied the growth here in the Commonwealth. So who's in Massachusetts? And this is, 19 of the largest 20 publicly traded biotech pharma organizations occupy space in Massachusetts. Genentech being the one that doesn't really have much of a space, but we're looking at opportunities to bring in more companies globally that want to do both R, research, D, development, and M, manufacturing. Historically speaking, research and development has always been a mainstay of Massachusetts with the schooling and the education that happens here. The manufacturing has not. And I'll sort of take a little tangent, but today, science, R&D, and manufacturing are all intertwined. We've all heard the term, working within the genetic makeup of a person and personalized medicine. Science is now at a point where scientists are working with my genetic makeup and why the person that might sit here has a different genetic makeup, why some drugs work for this person and don't work for me, why I get sick on this drug and they don't, why my hair falls out and theirs doesn't, why I get cured and they don't. And so it's based upon genetic makeup, same drug, different results. So now they're altering scientists, real time, first time in Framingham, Sanofi's doing this today, personalized medicine, altering drugs to work within your genetic makeup. And that manufacturing has to be close to the scientists. I'm never going to take away the value of MIT and Harvard, and that R&D will always be here, but the development and the manufacturing is now happening in the suburban market. Companies like Bluebird Bio, Moderna, many of the requirements that we're seeing in the market include GMP manufacturing uses, are all about growing that business. The growth of Millipore Sigma is supporting that business. They're a lab services company. They're not doing the testing. They're selling the equipment that helps people do the testing. And so the nature of the science has changed, and the proximity in which scientists need to work in conjunction with manufacturing. No longer are they building a highly valuable and dedicated drug that they think will work for the masses. Now they're working individually with people's different genetic makeups, and I think that that's important to note as science continues to grow, and that's why science is changing at such a rapid pace. I would just point out life science employment in the Commonwealth. This is from our research team. We have a phenomenal research team. They spend a lot of time. On the right-hand side, you see total office employment since 2007. It's a great stat. We've grown 18.8%, and wage growth has really grown like kind, nearly 20% since 2007 in the office world. That's a tremendous opportunity. If you compare that to the life science employment since 2007, we've grown 50% in our jobs, and wage growth has grown nearly 70%. And so we continue to see this trend going. People are doing new things in the science every single day. The venture funding that you'll see in the next slide has never been stronger than it has been today. The pipeline and IPOs are very important. And as you look at these companies and the demand profile that we're seeing, new companies are starting off every single day. This is not, we refer to the dot-com era when I was in the business in 98, 99, where 4 people would show up in a pickup truck and they needed at least 100,000 square feet. These are companies with deep pockets, with real business plans, real funding, and they've been very, very successful. Brammer Bioscience is doing contract manufacturing, right? So they're developing drugs for other smaller companies that can't make the investment to build their own manufacturing. So it's really a supply chain of uses that hit this marketplace. And I think one of the most important things that we'll talk about, and probably relates to what you guys need to talk about, is the timing of a lab tenant to get to the marketplace and to have a clear path for success. One of the biggest challenges as we work with companies is they want to go to ready sites. They want to know that they're permitted. They want to know that they can do what they want to do on those sites. So they really value Mass Bios, or Mass Life Sciences.
No, go ahead.
Platinum rating and what's going on in the marketplace. They value speed to market, and they want to get their projects up. They're chasing not only the dollars associated with developing drugs, but they're all in this for a cure in solving and saving people's lives.
Thank you. We're going to have a chance to ask Mr. Daniels some questions, but I know that Mr. Weiner has to leave, so I'm going to ask you to hold your questions for just a minute so that we can hear from Mr. Weiner, and then we'll come back and have some time to ask questions of Mr. Daniels, because we don't often have his expertise here, and we want to take advantage of that. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Weiner.
Thank you. I'm here with Susan Luminello, who is the Director of Public Health in town. Nobody is and continues to be more of a supporter than biotech in Burlington than me. As you remember, with the help, my help, and Kristen and the Planning Board, I testified and made presentations multiple times, even include town meeting, to show the benefits of biotech, not only for this community, but for science in general and health in general. We just want to point out, since it's an issue around, that we'll ultimately be talking about, an issue around rezoning, that there is what I consider a small loophole in our zoning bylaw in town when it comes to biotech. My phone ran off the hook today, and I didn't even know about this hearing until about 10:30 this morning when people, as you remember town meeting, when I was speaking so positively about biotech, that I was asked about different zonings and where biotech could be located. And there were two locations where biotech could go in with minimal oversight. And I was asked about that. And there were two in a specific zoning classification. One was at the Marriott, and we didn't expect one to go into the Marriott, and the other was the,
I believe it was Burlington Drive.
Woods, whatever.
No, it's, if you're talking about IH, it's the Burlington Marriott, the Hilton Garden, and the Oracle Garage.
Well, those were the only two, and town meeting thought that that would be okay because those could not be developed as biotech. Well, if we change the zoning on some of the requests, something happens. And what happens is this. Biotech company comes to Burlington, which is wonderful. They come before planning board. The planning board sends it to the Board of Health because it would be a change of use within the building from what is there now, which is office, to biotech. Now, that would come as a change of use. The Board of Health would be able to look at that and determine the safety for the community. Let's say it's okay. Terrific, they're in here. But as our excellent speaker just noted, these biotech companies come and go very quickly. They're coming like crazy. So let's say within a couple of months, this biotech company, which now has a change in use in place, goes under, changes its name, comes before the planning board, and wants to come into Burlington. The planning board looks at it. They can go in as a right without review of the Board of Health. It's a change of use. No, it's not a change of use. It's the same use. A site plan is not necessary, site review is not necessary from the Board of Health. So let's say the first company was level 2. The third comes in as level 3, and we don't necessarily want that in our community. No oversight by the board, formal oversight by the Board of Health. It may be a company that doesn't use hazardous materials per se, so they don't need a hazardous review. Let's say they're just going to go in, it's something new, something different, and something innovative. They come into Burlington without a safety review by the Board of Health. And that's what we do. We have an environmental engineer, we have director, we have health agents, that's what they do. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yes, I want biotech in this community. I support biotech in this community, but I believe that Board of Health should have some type of a review of what's going to go on there, a change in status, a change in And that's what I promised town meeting, and that's how it came to me. I promised town meeting that wouldn't happen, and here we are, because of a loophole in our zoning bylaw, we have that problem. Now, we need to talk about this. There are solutions, and I think that one of the solutions may be in discussion with the planning board, should the Board of Health adopt its own regulations that require all scientific to be reviewed by the Board of Health. We just became a platinum community. I don't want that to change, but we need to talk, because we have a small problem. We don't know if developing a regulation would change that platinum designation. Most companies, if not all, say they want things to happen in Burlington by right. Well, I think it can be by right, but by right with a safety review. I'm very positive about biotech, but I'm committed to safety in the community. Anything?
I think you covered it all. One of the things about the regulation is that's something that we would have to look at. We'd have to look at surrounding communities, what types of regulations they have. We haven't looked at that at all yet, so that'd be something that we would need to work on.
Now, we did check this with, you did confirm.
I spoke to the building inspector, and that was our understanding, exactly what Dr. Weiner.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Weiner.
Thank you.
I'm going to, before you go, I want to ask staff to weigh in, but first I want to thank you for coming and sharing your concern. And I want to assure you that this board greatly values the input of the Board of Health, and we have no intention of ever putting biotech in Burlington without it going through a proper safety review with the Board of Health. We rely on the Board of Health for these things, for many types of projects. And we never intend to put anything that should be reviewed by the Board of Health without having it be thoroughly reviewed by the Board of Health. We would not proceed without you. Kristen, can you just address Dr. Weiner's concern about the loophole?
Sure. So I spoke with Dr. Weiner today, also reassuring this is the opening of the hearing. It's very much getting information out. I was standing right next to Mr. Weiner or Dr. Weiner when we were standing at town meeting. I think we all value and need input from the Board of Health in all of these applications, which is one of the reasons why in the use line item itself, it's everything for life sciences subject to the regulations of the Board of Health. There are multi-layers within the bylaw of protections, and I think it's just something that we need to work through. I don't think that we have a red flag problem here at this point. If there's something that we could do better, and whether it's regulations of the Board of Health or any amendments to this process, I think we need to talk about that and want to have the Board of Health involved throughout the process. And I appreciate the comments and especially Dr. Weiner and the Board of Health being part of this process with us. This being the kickoff with these multiple boards here. We will be forming a subcommittee, or we'll be recommending a subcommittee be formed, and certainly be continuing this discussion throughout the next couple of planning board meetings.
Just to add to that too, so right now we don't have a regulation on biotech. It would likely involve a permitting process, but it wouldn't be a long process. They would still have to come before the board. There would be an application involved. So we'd have to talk about what kind of process we would plan on having.
Right, and obviously, we're not going to hammer all those details out tonight, but I think the message we want you to have is that we want to work with you on this. We will not proceed without your input. Yes, Joe?
I actually take it one step further. When this all came about, it was very exciting. It's a use that really diversifies our community, but I think I voiced my concerns early on that I don't know a lot about it, but I trust our Board of Health as, if not the best, probably the best Board of Health in the state of Massachusetts. And Dr. Weiner's been on there forever, and we
Not
trust
quite
you
forever.
immensely. And that's one of the only reasons that I actually was willing to go down that path, quite honestly, knowing that you people were going to be here. to, you know, assist this board and to be reviewing everything that came into this town, any kind of life science use or any biotech use or anything to that effect. So that's my concern, and I was only set at ease because of knowing the competence of the Board of Health.
Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you.
And thank you both for coming, thanks. So we are really tight on time. If there's anyone who has questions for Mr. Daniels, can you come up to the microphone, or if you're sitting up here, give me a little wave. We really only have about 5 minutes before we have to start the
Quick
next step.
question.
Yes.
Thanks for coming, by the way. You talk about manufacturing, custom manufacturing is basically what you seem to be saying. Does that manufacturing have to be physically in the same place as the R&D, or can it be 10 miles away, 5 miles, you know where I'm
In the
going?
manufacturing, you could drive by a manufacturing facility, and it looks exactly like, you know, any single-story or multi-story building. It's not manufacturing the way that we think of GE. So ideally, a lot of the companies are now putting their research, development, manufacturing together. For those companies that feel like they need to have their research and development in Cambridge, they will bring their manufacturing out into the suburban marketplace. It depends on what the levels in which they're manufacturing.
Okay, so there's some, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions? Mr. Pearson?
I just have one question about this platinum status. Do all of the towns that have these major clusters that you have little maps of have platinum status?
And I need to go back. I believe Lexington certainly does. Andover does. Not all of the towns have that status.
How about Billerica?
I'd have to go back and take a look.
So if I can interrupt, I do have the list. So Woburn, Bedford, Billerica, and Lexington all are platinum status.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
thank you, Chris.
Sure.
And I think the platinum status matters to the tenant. So from a purely, you know, to answer your question, and I don't want to take up too much time, tenants come in and they want to know that there's a streamlined process. They don't want to spend a lot of time, energy, and effort. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars reviewing plans and permits and trying to understand a building with engineering standards, and then you know, they want to know that their efforts are being put into a town that's going to streamline a process for them.
I understand. Mr. Weiss? Thank you.
Scott Weiss with the Terrace Company. Thanks, Matt, for coming. I think that was really informative. I did want to follow up on Ernie's question about manufacturing space, because I think from what we've seen and we've heard a little bit, it's not manufacturing in some big building, you know, stamping metal or electronics kind of thing. Like you said, there's not really a lot of difference between a R&D lab and manufacturing lab, because it's become so personalized in how the medicine's made now. It is almost like a research space, and I just wanted you to comment on that.
Yeah, the manufacturing, drug manufacturing in the past, you've seen these giant plants with these big, you know, bioliters, you know, big tubs. They don't mix drugs like that anymore. They don't do that. It's really done in a lab setting. It's just in a much more FDA-approved, not food and drug, a CLIA lab or very clean environment. So class 10,000 clean rooms, these buildings need a lot of air, you know, tremendous amount of HEPA filters in the ceiling, tremendous amount of power to generate their process, and very expensive equipment in the building, but it's not manufacturing the way that you and I would think of, you know, what it's gonna take to build a door or a car.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have any questions for Mr. Daniels?
Can I just make a
Yes,
comment?
of course.
Yes. Quite a few years ago, sorry that he left, but there was an issue between the Board of Health and the Planning Board about the approval process. So we just got together with them and said, in effect, look, whatever comes by us goes to you, and we rely on you. That's really, most of the things that we have, it's a decision of the Planning Board. But we said, in effect, we're ceding that decision to you. So whatever whatever your decision is, comes to us. And there was a question even of wording. I think, Ernie, you were there at that time. And we said, no, we won't even change any of the wording. Yeah, we said, to me, it just, if it has anything to do with biotech, I think the staff just ought to put that condition on there that even though it may not have to go to police, fire, and a lot of other people, that anything in that area will go to the Board of Health, because that's what the
will.
expertise is.
It definitely will.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, there are areas where it does spell that out, so we'll work on that as we move forward.
So,
I'll be
you
really
told me
fast.
that I had to switch to the next topic. It's at 6:40, but I'm going to give you
Really
some
fast.
time right now.
So we wanted to really, we felt that the initiative that we began 2 years ago for life science was something that we started with a kind of an educational process at that time. We wanted to start this with a little bit of that at the same time and really understand why these changes are happening. As demonstrated in the slides, and it's actually been interesting to me, listening to kind of where people are landing, talking to our neighbors, and looking at the map. And the map is that, Burlington has been over a lot of years, whether it was, the 90s with a lot of the software companies and, medical device. And our MO is to set the stage and be ready for industry as it grows and changes. We're kind of joining this party a little bit late. So whereas, our neighbors have had platinum status for quite some time, we've had bronze status. We haven't really identified life science within our bylaw very well, which is what we did with the zoning change at the last town meeting. And then taking a look at some of the nuance, working with the Board of Health as we specifically had in the use tables, and moving forward with that change and going forward with Mass Bio to receive the platinum status, to put us on the map. This is putting us on the map. So while we're on the map, so what do we do? And you look at life sciences allowed in the IG district as well as the IH district. The IH district currently allows for some larger height to 155 feet, up to 155 feet. We felt as staff, thinking about life science, thinking about structured parking needs, thinking about ways we can, if we're going to see a demand of new construction, how can we make it more flexible in terms of allowing for potential IH rezonings, but also we're not wanting to see 155-foot buildings. So one of the things that we put forward was the amendment for the IH zoning amendment to reduce some of the setbacks as well as, most importantly, reduce the height from 155 feet. So we had in the legal notice that to reduce the height and modify the height, I think the first draft we had was 80. We actually, in doing some analysis, would recommend a 90-foot cap, and that would just, because of the ceiling to ceiling, we hadn't done the analysis we have now. So we would want to throw out 90 feet on the table for that. So that's where we are. There's 4, you'll see, you have a handout that is two-sided. One side is kind of where we were, our history, kind of some of the highlights of things that are happening around us, as well as what's in front of us now. So we have 3 new IH sites proposed. We currently have 3 sites, the Hilton Garden, the Oracle Garage, and the Marriott. All are not really open for redevelopment. So now it's the 60 Blanchard, the 3 Vandegraff, and the Summit, which the Summit will be all of the Summit properties, as you can see on the map. I'm happy to answer some questions, but we are so pressed for time. My recommendation and our staff recommendation to the planning board is to set up a subcommittee in order to continue this dialogue, as well as continue the dialogue at subsequent meetings, and potentially have kind of an outline for our next meetings coming up, so we can organize a discussion, as there's a lot of meat on the bone to talk through. So any questions, especially process questions from any of the committee, I'm happy to take.
Yeah, what I'm going to suggest is that if members of the Land Use Committee or members of Zoning Bylaw Review Committee have process questions, they should ask them now. If we, the planning board, have members, we can hold that till later in our meeting, because we're not leaving. But the rest of these people might not be staying. So anyone from the other 2 committees that have questions for Kristen on process? Yes?
I just wanted to check with you folks. I have heard in the past that it's not a good idea to do something called spot zoning. And
Yes.
this strikes me as being extremely spot zoning. And so I'm not versed in what spot zoning is and what it's for and against is, but it looks like spot zoning to me. Is this a problem?
I personally don't believe it is at all a problem with spot zoning. Spot zoning, classical spot zoning cases are, you're in the sleepy little residential district, and then you put in, I don't know, some crazy candy factory right in the middle. But for this, you were already in industrial zoning districts. This is one of the different types of industrial zoning districts, especially with the modifications that we're making to IH, making it actually a little bit closer to IG, due to the sensitivity of impact and height that we didn't want to promote. I personally wouldn't even begin to worry about spot zoning for this particular application.
Anyone else with questions about how this process is going to continue? I just want to assure everyone, this is the first step. All of your other boards are going to be meeting and discussing this at great length. You'll have plenty of time to ask questions. We also will be having other planning board meetings where we discuss this at greater length. This was an initial presentation, so I understand people may have questions that they didn't get answered today, but there will be ample opportunity for that in future meetings. Everyone good to
Madam
proceed?
Chair,
Yes.
just one thing, since Mr. Daniels has taken the time to come here, and we've done a little bit of discussion after he spoke, did he hear, I'd be interested to know if he heard anything that would preclude Life Sciences locating here, and what we said. Do you see anything to be a problem?
No, listen, we work with many corporations looking for life science space. I didn't hear anything. I think if there was a recommendation that I could make from a third-party group that works with companies is create a process that's very streamlined, create a process that's very transparent and opening and welcoming. And I know that, being late to the game as Burlington is a little bit, as Chris had pointed out, it provides an opportunity, given how tight the market is today. I can't tell you that it's going to be tight forever. I think that, create a process that's streamlined and that's attractive to, both tenants and developers to bring life science space into Burlington would be a benefit.
Real quick, one of the things that has come up quite a bit, and even we just did economic development director interviews all day Monday, was that really just life science, it's like speed, it's raw, and it's who you know, how fast you can do it, predictability. The fact that Matt Daniels is sitting here, now he knows we're telling him, hey, we're friendly to life science, bring them here. And hopefully you'll tell all your friends that are brokers with life science companies. That had been a problem a couple months ago, or a couple years ago, and I think we're still kind of getting over that. So I think this part of the dialogue is very important. So that's it.
Thank you, and thank you so much for coming, Mr. Daniels.
Sorry for taking so much time.
No, you didn't at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It
Your
was
presentation was
ambitious.
excellent. It was very efficient.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask,
Thank you.
the next items that we're going to discuss very briefly, unfortunately, are two proposed changes to the zoning bylaw. And I'd ask the proponents to come forward. Again, for the members of Land Use and Planning and Zoning Bylaw Review, this is an initial presentation. We're probably not going to have time for questions tonight, but this is for you all to take, the information for you to take back to your individual boards, and I know that the proponents will be before you to discuss at greater detail. Thank you for coming, and I'm sorry for the late start.
Not a problem. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and we'll make it very quick. I'm Thomas Murphy. I'm here representing Escadrille Realty LLC, who is the proponent behind some proposed changes. With me is Michael Murray, who works for Escadrille Realty LLC. And I'm going to let Mike give you a quick overview as to what this is about. We understand this is just an icebreaker, and we'll be quick.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know we're short on time, so I'll go as quick as I can. If I'm going too fast, tell me so. So I'm just going to go through the changes. They're on the board there. Just general overview. The zoning bylaw does not define parking structures in any way. So that we took in talking with staff, and they had a lot of this language already, is to define parking structures and to break it down into different categories, about a full-blown parking structure, which would be multiple levels, an integrated parking structure, which would be incorporated into a building, and then a parking deck, which would just be one level above grade parking structure. Then we move on to the use table, where parking garages were semi-defined previously, so we're gonna strike that and then add the use table for the 3 uses that we defined, and the uses would all be the same across the board, with one exception, to allow for parking decks on a special permit in the BG zone. The next step that we took was to add some restrictions to this. So this is the density table, and in the BG zone, you can see a new footnote of 12 on the maximum aggregate to building ground area percentage. And that note is to say that if any kind of parking structure, any of the 3, would be incorporated into a site, then the maximum building to ground area percentage would be reduced from 33 1/3% to 25%. And then the next step that we took was in section 7, where there's some more parking requirements. The top there is just the existing language is there now, and the bottom is what we've modified it to. We've just kind of broken it apart into subsections. In subsection 1, you can see we just added the 2 references that we added to the use table. So that just references that. There's really no other change there. And then we added another subsection, which would be a further restriction to say that parking structures within this BG district would not be able to be located within 200 feet of a residential district in town. So those are the changes, and then this is quick, I'll go through this as fast as I can. This is just a zoning map of Burlington. The red color is the BG district, and just to point out, the bright yellow color are the PDDs, where parking structures are allowed, except for, I'm not sure about Grandview and Arbor Point, because I don't have that language, but all the other ones, as just a point of reference, allow for parking structures. If you could just note in the center of town, the red district, and when we go to the next slide, you'll see that those go away. Parking structures are already allowed in all of those areas, so this won't affect that in any way. And then you'll see small clusters of red in BG zones in the rest of town. If you go to the next slide, you'll see those go away. Those are removed from this because the 200-foot buffer would totally encompass those lots. So they wouldn't be able to build a parking structure there because of that. And then on to the next slide. So these are the areas of town that are left. In the next slide, please. And this is just a zoomed in of those different sections. This is an area, Wayside Road and Cambridge Street. So, and Ray Ave is down the bottom there, and on the corner there, that's Cafe Escadrille, and the Crossroads Plaza is there. And in the rear of Crossroads Plaza, you'll see the hatched area. That's the 200-foot buffer from the residential. So there, in theory, if there was a redevelopment on any of these sites, there could be a parking structure, but it could not be in that hatched area. And then the same is true for these areas. This is the Middlesex Turnpike and Wheeler Road. As a reference, kind of in the middle is like the Bed Bath & Beyond site. And there's some areas on the periphery of both sides is residential properties that create buffers to some of these areas as well. And then the next slide, this is Mall Road, and the large parcel there is the mall itself. Along Mall Road, you can see that it abuts a lot of residential. So a lot of those properties would have very limited availability because of the buffer. The mall would obviously have the ability to do this if it met the other criteria. And then there's one last area, Middlesex Turnpike and Bedford Street. So this is where the Citizens Bank on the corner there, and the Dunkin' Donuts is there. So the buffer would run along the whole front of this and the corner of this these properties there, and it would be regulated to the back if they had room to do it there, for a site redevelopment. And the last site, so this is the reason that we're looking to do this, is for the Escadrille. That we have this lot, which is on Ray Ave, which is adjacent to the Cafe Escadrille. And we do have a need for parking, which I can get into more detail at further meetings, but thought that this would be a good site for this, because as you probably can't see it that well here, but if you look to the back of this site, the grade goes up, there's a hill, there's a wall. And on the other side of that wall is our upper parking lot for Cafe Escadrille. So we wouldn't need an elaborate ramp system to build up. This would just be another level of parking, basically right on top of the existing parking that's there. So we thought it was an appropriate location. Again, I'll get into details later about, I know we're short on time, about the need for the parking, but that's where we came to, and all the restrictions that we went through, we thought would be reasonable restrictions. We know that not allowed, parking structures aren't allowed in a lot of areas of town, so we thought that this was a way to kind of ease into that and see for creative site development for other sites in town, which we can't predict what people will do, but we don't want to kick the door wide open either, so.
Okay. Well, you are a model of efficiency. I can't believe how much information you got in about 5 minutes. Thank you. I do apologize for rushing you. We're not going to get into the weeds, but if anybody had any preliminary questions that they wanted to ask real quick, we have just a few minutes. All right. So I know you're going to be scheduling meetings with the other boards, and you're going to be back in front of us. Thank you. Again, I apologize for rushing you.
Thank you for
Okay,
having us.
thanks.
And I'm happy to, I'm happy to send out the PowerPoint to the rest of the
That would be
group that we
great.
got today,
Okay.
so you can do some more evaluation, because there's a lot of
Thank you.
information in there.
All right.
On
So
motion?
excuse me?
Oh, yep,
Yes, you do have a motion.
okay.
You have one motion. So Madam Chair, what I'd like you to read into record is on the top of the second page, the public hearing, and then continue just item D. Sorry. Can someone hand it down here?
All right. This one?
Yeah.
Barbara?
With the petition to amend the zoning bylaw, Article 5, is that what you're talking about?
I gave my
Okay.
copy away.
So you
Oh,
want to?
yeah, I just need you to read into record the public hearing petition to amend, yes,
Okay.
exactly what Paul was saying. So thank you, continue.
Top of the,
I'm just opening. the
Petition
meeting.
to amend the zoning bylaw, excuse me, Barbara,
Sorry.
Article 5, she said continue. Dimensional regulation schedule to modify the height and dimensional requirements of the high-rise IH zoning district submitted by the planning board.
Yes, and can you continue that to the next meeting?
Yes, please. Don't I need to vote? We need to vote on that, right? All those in favor?
no.
No,
we did-
now you need to read
Motion
the
to continue, item D.
Okay.
The petition to amend the zoning bylaw, Article 5, dimensional regulation schedule to modify the height and dimensional requirements of the high-rise IH zoning district to the planning board meeting of November 21st.
Second.
So
before
that
we-
particular item was the only one that had no glitches in the posting. The rest of them are officially opening at the next meeting, that they were all
Okay.
discussions. So that is why you had to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We need a second.
Let's vote on that, but I want to then appoint the subcommittee. You might as well do that as well. Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. Okay, this is for the life science dimensional regulation changes. We're going to appoint a subcommittee. Who would be interested in serving on that subcommittee? This is just planning board. Anyone?
From the planning board, is that what you said?
Yes.
Sure.
Ernie, anyone else? I will. Okay, thank you, Brenda. All right, so Brenda and Ernie will be our planning board representatives on the subcommittee. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for coming. And I apologize for how brief and fast everything went, but I know you'll have time to ask your questions at your own meetings. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask you to ask a question? Would all of you like to be updated when we do have subcommittee meetings of the planning board? Okay, all right. I will send that info out to your chairs. Thanks.
Subcommittees have to be posted now, don't they?
They do, but I just want to give it notice as well via email. Thank you.
One comment. As far as from zoning bylaw review committee, we will, it seems to work nicely if we just have members from the ZBRC attend the subcommittee meeting. We're doing it with the housing with Mike and Bill, and if that's.
That would be great. Thank you.
Then we don't have to have 10 different subcommittees.
Sounds great.
That sounds like it would work very well. Thank you.
Thank you. You need to motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second?
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. All right.
Seven,
You're all
eight,
welcome to
9
stay.
plus, yeah.
Okay.
7.